Right. In the mid-70s or early 70s, before I came here in 76 or 77. Prior to that, the state government wanted a power station implanted at Chitaway. So I haven't seen the plan of that, but the Murray Breen and others who fought that early campaign fought it off. And there was a community campaign before I got here in early 70s, mid-70s, to Chitaway. So, and of course, the wetlands area and all that area around the Tuggerah Lakes Reserve, Nature Reserve, which national parks own nowadays, were all part of that plan, either for dumps, coal dumps and ash dumps and God knows what, with a power station. It's a massive thing. So that was fought off mid-70s to late 70s. Then, of course, that was put off. But then in 1982, 83, they really had plans to develop. They had this Mardi power station, which they definitely wanted Wyong and Tuggerah area to be swallowed up, and Jillaby and those areas around here to be swallowed up completely in power stations and coal mines. They really wanted the coal that was under the lake and under the catchment area here, and that was the goal. And they were pushing ahead with it. Electricity Commission were planning this expansion. First of all, they'd had earmarked a substation, and that was the first thing. But that was only for public view. Was a substation. But as you got into the plan, as the plan unfolded in 1985, it was to be coal dumps. There were 5 separate small collieries on that site, bringing coal up from beneath Tuggerah Lake. It was the eastern lease under the Tuggerah Lake of coal, and then you had the western lease out here under the catchment areas. The Central Coast Wetlands, which was the pioneer dairy, it was a vast dairy. I mean, it was nearly 400 hectares then, the whole lot of it. And not 5 collieries, I'm sorry, 2 collieries there. There were others around Wyong. There were 2 collieries on the site, sorry, and coal dumps and 2 collieries and a mine shaft going down and access facilities for going underneath the lake, which is now that area particularly where the area for the miners to go under is now Central Coast Sporting Complex. And all the ground facilities for going under the lake to bring the coal up, 2 collieries, coal dumps and a large conveyor carrying the coal across the Wyong Industrial Estate and the highway and the railway across to the Mardi power station, which was to be planted right beside the Mardi Dam. And an ash dam. I mean, when you have a power station right nearby, you have an ash dam. So literally, Wyong Creek there, from where the old milk factory is back toward that way, would have been ash dam. Well, it is. It's gigantic. You go and have a look at a power station, have a look at the areas they take up, and their ash dams. I mean, we're talking about the ash dams up north now. The problems that they have. Well, we would have had that down here. When we got into the paperwork, ended about it, I went off searching for bits and pieces, but plenty of us searching. I mean, there was a key guy called Tony Spears. He may still be around, haven't heard from him for a few years, but he was the one who cottoned on to what was happening, and he was able to trigger, by going to the minister, a commission of inquiry into electricity planning. So that was critical. I mean, Tony Spears' critical work, and then he worked with us in the community. And then I was the president of the Ratepayers Association, and Sylvia Turner, who was a great, she was on council. We got Sylvia onto council. She was a brilliant person. She lives up north now. Sylvia was secretary of it, of the Ratepayers Association. We did a lot of work around all of the different progress associations. And I remember talking to the Lake Munmora people. They said, oh, the asthma and bronchitis up here from the current power stations, that was Vales Point, Munmora then, and of course Araring, the 3 power stations. They said, oh, the air quality is terrible up here. And I happened to go off to the University of Newcastle and talk to an air quality specialist. And he said, well, here's a document. He said, we did a document a couple of years ago, three professors, and it's there. He said, you can have a copy of it. Like it, I brought it home. And when I opened it up, of course, Doyleson was critically critical. They literally said the sulfur dioxide emissions from the power stations was at a critical level, and Doyleson was absolutely off the map. And they said then that no more sulfur dioxide emitting industries should be put around the area. And because I thought, hang on, bang-o, because more people have been complaining about it. That hang on, what have we got here? And this is only really about 2 weeks before the commission was hearing in Gosford. So I got onto the doctors. I got onto Ruth Martyr up at, she was on the Progress Association at Mudmora, and she said, yes, the doctor's been complaining about it too. I said, well, I wonder if I can get onto the doctors. And sometimes these things occasionally happen. Jackie, you would know from being an activist, sometimes the pins fall into place. You pick up the telephone, ring the doctor, got onto the doctor, which is unusual. He said, yes, I've heard about those new plans down south and all what's going on down here. I said, would you put your concerns about air quality on paper? He said, I most certainly would. And there it was in paper. So what we had from University of Newcastle was a causal study, and now we had an effect document from the doctors at Munmora. Well, we put this into our submission. Tony Spears and I sat up till 1 o'clock in the morning, doing this thing, and then the commission was hearing on that morning, and I went up and got the doctor's statement, and we presented it to the commissioner. It sounded like a big, and all the Electricity Commission were there, the media were there were submissions going on, and Tony was standing there giving our submission, and I came in and handed the doctor's statement with the other, and he said, I want to divert from what I'm saying to tell you what's happening in the north. That air quality, there's asthma and bronchitis going on from what was up there, and here is the doctor's statement, here is the studies. And
wow.
This independent commissioner said no. He read the documents briefly and in silence, and he said, I'm suspending the commission for the moment, and you'll hear when I reform the commission, because this came out of left field. They had no idea. And then another group of people out, there were a lot of people involved. There were people from the valleys, and there were other media people, and the group got involved, and within a couple of weeks, this is in August, was the hearing, in about, was October. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. Next thing in October, it hit the headlines. The front page of every city daily newspaper in Australia had this story of asthma and bronchitis and fallout from power stations, with a big photograph on the front of the Sydney Morning Herald. And Tony rang us up in the morning. Tony Spears said, switch on your television. The live shows, all the talkback shows were up there at Munmora with their cameras and interviewing people. Said, this is terrible, this is terrible. All this, asthma and bronchitis in the communities. Commission of inquiry. Look, in the background too, it's one of those things. When Tony Spears triggered this inquiry, what was happening in the background in the state government was the Electricity Commission of New South Wales, a very powerful body. They were the dealers around the table, of your portfolios in Sydney. They were very powerful. They owned all the cards, so they were literally saying, well, support us and we'll support you, we'll make sure these things happen to your portfolio. And they were a bit like dealers around the table. It was so powerful then. And it had overrun government, and other things overrun government. And really what happened was this inquiry was well founded, and unbeknown to others, it was an independent commissioner. He was an independent commissioner, and what had happened was they'd been borrowing overseas. So the Electricity Commission was borrowing heavily overseas, hundreds of millions of dollars. We can't keep borrowing money overseas. to keep building this massive power network. This commission of inquiry, what happened, I think, with our intervention in this commission, whoa, there's something wrong here. So what happened was that it gave the government of the day, Labor government of the day, the tools to begin to dismantle this power base. They've been wanting to do it, but they needed tools to do it. This commission of inquiry, when this happened, they weren't going to get 3.5 power stations, because all of a sudden, straight away, the one they wanted here was problems because of what we'd uncovered and what the media had uncovered. So the media were going up saying, oh, God, this is terrible, this is terrible. So it really gave the government of the day the power to intervene. And so it stopped, this thing here stopped the progress of building coal-fired power stations. They went ahead and built Mount Piper, and half of Mount Piper was already running, but they built another part of Mount Piper, and there was a Foy book, but that was it. And then from then on, no more power stations were built in New South Wales. Oh, well, then the land was, well, they wanted it to be sold off, but it was owned by the commission, or that was sold to the commission in the 80s by the Hannons. They'd stopped the power stanchions coming across, from there. There were several players in all this. Anyway, so it became, the land became surplus for the government. Well, we can sell it off. So it was on the market. It went on the market as a big dairy, 400-hectare dairy for sale, and what can be done. So there were interventions in those early days. Bob Graham did play a role. He went to the minister at that stage, said, no, it should be community land. And we were talking about golf courses. Remember when golf courses were big around that time? And so we had, and then John Asquith and others had the biodiversity group formed. I was in on that with John Asquith and others, and a person called Frances Pike, and she was very good. And we lobbied the Environment Minister then. Eventually, a lot of heavy lobbying, she had it pulled off the market. So we had all this lobbying. So it was pulled off for about 12 months. And then went back on again. And then an even larger group formed. A councillor, he's dead now, but he passed on as Councillor John Axford, Labor councillor in Wyong, and he got into it because it pulled in Grant McBride. And, so it drew in those. There was a political football around, and even then the Chamber of Commerce got involved. There's large meetings. This is in 1997, and then then there was a native title that was established to put on it. Anyway, what happened? The government once again pulled back off the market. 2002, it was declared open space for environment and education. It was given back to the people, and they got it gazetted as a new public reserve, as a new reserve, and then a trust, a volunteer trust, and I was appointed the first chairman of that trust for those first few years. You drive the railway. You drive across the railway from this eastern side where the road is and all that, but you go under the railway at Wyong there, and you go over, and there it is in front of you. You've got the river on the left-hand side, and then you've got this vista. You've got this beautiful big lagoon in the middle, and the buildings in there, and further back are the forests on the edge of it. So the birdies are already in there in those days when it was really just being looked after as a quasi little farm, small farm area that people used to look after the place, with the rundown buildings and big old dairy buildings. We had to spend a lot of time and money dismantling buildings and making it all safe. All the fencing had to be done. Cleared. There was wire everywhere. There's 40, 50 years of wire and posts, and Under Don Craig's leadership, over 100,000 trees have been planted along the waterways from coming from the Tuggerah station all around that Oxbow area and all up through. 120,000, more than 100,000 trees. But now we have a new, young, vibrant trust, and young Jedfield, whom we nurtured him at Wyong High School. And other people come in, and you're always running into people. I'm always astounded, people with expertise. You can be around people for ages, and perhaps say, "Oh, but didn't you know he or she were expert?" I said, "No, I didn't, because they never told me." But there's so many people coming on. There's so many elements now, and the young people. I'm not. I've only got some expertise in. Look, there's always things on the fringe. There were things like a recycling plant across the road from it that I got onto national parks about the fact that anything flowing would flow into their SEP 14 wetland area. So you got along Lake Road there, any super developments, the more you build up along Lake Road, the more water you got rushing through into the SEP 14, which is known as something else now, wetland, the national parks. But national parks are always underfunded and understaffed. In theory, we should have a person there looking after the 500 acres, the Tuggerah Nature Reserve, and working with the trust, but you don't get that sort of support from governments. Governments just don't put sufficient resources into natural systems. Wildlife was incredible. Black swans and all sorts of things that the Aborigines used to camp on the Tuggerah foreshore there, and they'd have visiting tribes from the mountains who would come down, bring mountain food, and they would have a corroboree and swap for fish and eggs and all sorts of stuff. But we can't afford to lose banks of wetlands and forests. We can't afford to lose this between Sydney and Newcastle.